thanks to everybody for this season. It's appreciated the adjustments. There's that word. There we go. That you guys make. And I know whether it's Zoom or travel or getting stuck on the road, it's a lot that, and then even just personally too. There's always things that you guys have to ask and do professionally, and that's understood, but it's, I think I'm appreciative of working with this group and all you guys and what you do and how you handle things as professionally as is humanly possible. So, except for you, Dave. You gonna ask the first question today? Okay. Yeah. But anyway, I'm making light of some of that, but truly, thank you. So, having said that, it's
the first question would be, how are you doing?
I'm good. I had my right one done previously, so I had a little bit of a baseline, and we've got such a great medical group, and Travis Mack and Dave Petron kind of kept me up and functioning, and then Dr. Peters is at the top of his profession, did the surgery, and it's a success, at least for now. So now I've got to fight through some rehab, but thanks. Doing good.
How is this, other than the surgery, how has the last week been different than other, last weeks, or, digesting how a season different?
Every year is different. I think fundamentally the process is similar. You're looking at different things substantively, but the commonality, I think is, your initial reflection, some of the emotion, that goes with that, processing just the fact that your season's over when, I really, really believed that, we just kind of needed a spark, and we had a chance to do something special. That didn't happen. So there's, a sense of loss, in that sense. And then you get, I think it's important to get some distance, whether it's forced on you like it was in my case, or you can step away from it to a degree. I think that distance and, letting the emotion kind of flow through, and then having an opportunity to be responsive as opposed to reactive. And, that process, hasn't occurred yet on the level that it will. But the initial part of it is, unless you're the last team standing, you go through some of the same emotions, regardless of what the result is other than that one.
It's maybe a little weird going through this offseason, just knowing you guys, it's like a full offseason, compared to what it was. How does that kind of play into things?
Yeah, I think there's part of it that there's been kind of a new normal. And I think to function at the level that, you wanted to, and potentially the highest level possible, you had to really embrace, whether it be, an initial hiatus, the bubble, a shortened off season, a shortened season, you go through. And I think that what happened a little bit, I think for everyone, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but the seasons kind of run together a little bit. The breaks were longer than All-Star break, but it's kind of that idea that this was almost one season, 3 seasons packed into kind of one longer period. And I think I'm sure you guys felt it too. There's some fatigue that you're fighting, and everybody had that. So I think everybody will be appreciative of an off season where you have more time to recharge and spend whatever it is you choose to do personally, whether it's more time with your family or different interests. I think that's a possibility out there now.
When the season ended, there was a lot of questions about what was going to happen with your job and whether you were going to want to stay here. So I guess, can we just address that? What do you want?
Yeah, I think, first of all, let me say, I've said this before, but it's worth saying again. My family's loved it here, and don't judge my tense when I speak. So my family loves it here. How's that? Whether it's school, the community, Salt Lake, the city, the experience has been and continues to be a great one. I'm privileged, to coach a group of players, and I'm reminded of that, consistently throughout the year. We're all not perfect, but I'm grateful for that, and I really like our players. Additionally, from an ownership standpoint, appreciate the things, that Ryan's doing. Have great respect for him and his vision for the franchise. And then, working with Justin and Danny's been great. Obviously have tremendous respect for them. So, beyond that, I think I've, continued to maintain that I'm not going to discuss my contractual situation publicly. That's just not something that that I want to do or I'm comfortable doing.
When you reflect on what happened this season, and obviously you guys had championship contention goals, why do you think you fell kind of short the way that you did, and what were the kind of biggest gaps between expectations and reality in your mind?
Well, I think, first of all, I think, having championship level aspirations is something, we had them the previous year as well, in a real way. Expectations, put another layer on top of that. We had the best offense in the league. I think the best offense historically with either Hassan or Rudy on the floor. We knew last year, the way the season ended. I said before, I wish we had another game. I wish that game 6 had happened earlier in the series. It actually did this year. It happened in game 2. But, I think every year, part of, the offseason process that I alluded to before is taking, a long look at that and seeing how you can improve. Without dissecting the regular season, I think, I was consistent throughout the year saying, we want to be the best version of ourselves at the end of the year. And, in contrast, maybe to what was, the best, pure winning percentage in Jazz history the year before, but, the same feeling of coming up short, last year. With this year, I can, I can go through the things in the Dallas series that I felt, impacted the result. One of them was just our shooting. We shoot 22% in the series, so it's 22 or 27. 22 the last 3 games. When they had Luka. So it's that said, there's games you want to grind out when you don't make shots, and we actually did that in game 1. So that's a broad stroke. I think we felt some of the same challenges containing the ball throughout different parts of the series, but I thought our guys adjusted to that well. We dropped our pickup points. We shifted more. We were able to really limit some things and impact some things where, had we shot the ball better, we would have had a different result, just based on, the QSQ data. And that doesn't do a lot for you right now. So, you try to look at all the other variables, the shots you're getting, what can you do different defensively? The 5 different pick and roll coverages that we threw at Colbert didn't impact game 2. But I thought it had an impact, the rest of the series. You can go through all the minutia, and when you do it right now, like I'm doing with you, I don't think it's the best way to analyze, that series or the season. I don't think you can necessarily separate out a series, because a series, by definition is a certain matchup with a particular team. So, which again, that's something you can't control. The year before we couldn't control injuries. We didn't have that this year. We were healthy, and that was great. So in that sense, the opportunity this year didn't have that hurdle. But again, those are questions I think, as you step back and, for me, I'll watch the film. We'll meet with Danny and Justin, and I've already done some of that with our staff, kind of impromptu, which is good to the extent that you feel the emotion and some of your short-term feelings, and then you either debunk them or you find other ones or whatever the case may be. But I think that whole thought process is something that has yet obviously to occur on the level that it will. And obviously that's important. You're not satisfied. You have aspirations to be better and win more. And that's what we'll try to do.
Well, you've been able to break down the film yet, but have you been able to pinpoint why you shot about 9 or 10% the last 2-3 years in the playoffs?
I felt like, even you're looking at, were we getting good shots? And I think, they put a huge emphasis on taking away early threes early in the series. I think our, we were getting like 33% of our shots from three. As the series went on, we moved up to like 42, 44. So we actually did start getting those shots. We just didn't make them. We were getting the rim earlier in the series, and we didn't finish at the rim the way we did during the regular season either. So that's always a hard one. It's why, I just used it, kind of as an example with Andy's question, but that's always a hard one to process, because you don't want to just say, hey, we didn't shoot well. You hear that. Sometimes that's a good one during the season to help you get to the next game. It's a make or miss league. And then you realize it's actually true. But you have to be able to perform and win when you're not making. But as far as why we didn't, shoot at the rate that we did I guess you'd expect some drop up, but it's pretty extreme. And at the same time, I think Dallas shot like 7% higher than they do during the regular season. So I don't have an answer for you that is satisfactory to me.
When you look at what your goal was this year and what it has been, what do you guys have to do just as an organization to get to what your stated goal is, which is to be the last team standing?
Yeah, I mean, that is the goal. And I think, embracing the process of improvement during the season so that you can continue to improve to the extent that you're able during the year. Some of the broader questions about roster and things, those are things that, are best for you to ask Danny and Justin. That said, we'll all meet. We'll talk about exactly what you're bringing up, how you can be better. And again, I think it feeds back to, the question previously is that, you want to give that first, you want to kind of give it time to breathe, and then you want to be exhaustive in how you look at that. I think there's times when, again, you want to be responsive, I should say, as opposed to reactionary. So there's things that are easily ascertained more than others. And then you also, you go from identifying something to addressing it and solving it. And, but the identification process and how you weight certain things, every team is going to have some flaws, and how do you mitigate those and maximize your strengths? And the best way to go about that, that's going to come through, dialogue and, everybody sharing and responding and collaborating on that question. And I'll give my input, obviously, just like everyone else.
Where do you think Donovan still has room to grow as a player?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is Donovan's he's a young player. So I think the question itself is a good one. And I think it's one that he asks himself as well. That, you at his age, at this point in his career, it's great that you have areas to improve. He's someone that's shot the ball like crazy in the playoffs, and didn't shoot it as well this year. But we know what a good shooter he is, whether it's off the dribble or catch and shoot. So I'm not right now, gonna dissect, basically a player development plan. But that's actually something that we do at the end of the season. It's something that we do during the year, is try to give guys feedback. And certainly, at the end of the year, you have a larger sample size, and you can dig in even more. And, that's dialogue based too. I think, players' input on that is really, really important. And I think also maybe to point the question is, how can every player improve to help the team win? And that's part of it too, because, there may be 10 areas you want to improve in, but prioritizing them, I think, is also important. And, that's what kind of creates a plan for your off season and the things that you embrace and work on.
Because there are emotions involved, because it's humans, you talked about reactive versus measured response.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because a lot of things that happen in the season are reactive on the floor. How do you balance that? Do you ever have to meet reaction with reaction? Essentially, as I'm saying, you have to meet the emotion.
Absolutely. Particularly, I think the question involved, the season. So that's where the response is important, because you're talking about, hundreds of different inputs. During a given game or during a series, it requires you to be prepared to react. And I think that's something, frankly, that we're really good at. I mentioned Colbert, like you start the game in a pick and roll coverage and, a guy gets hot, how long do you want to live with that shot? You change coverage again, you're going to give something up. Then, you begin with a certain coverage in game 3, and then you change the other way because he's not, 10 of 12 from 3 or whatever it was, so, those reactions are consistent and ongoing. If a player gets in foul trouble, we want to attack Luka. He gets in foul trouble, we want to attack him even more. You want to get to the rim. They're collapsing the paint. Let's run a play that allows us to get a second side pick and roll. Bogey's post up. We didn't consciously try to stop posting Bogey. We did. They shifted and double teamed the same way we did to Luka. So Luka stopped posting. So that's something obviously that you can anticipate after a guy has a big night on the post. And you want to make sure there's 2 or 3 different ways they could double team. They could double team off the ball. They could just shift heavy. They could change the matchup. But I think you have to be prepared for all those things, particularly regarding how you space when he has the ball in the post. So some quick examples for you, but, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I know that we do that. And it's something that the reason I know it is because I know how much we prepare for it. I think the key is, what are you reacting to so that you're able to identify it quickly? And then what's your tipping point? Do you want to make someone beat you? You may go into a game and say, we're going to make Lucas score, and then at what point are you tired of seeing him score? Well, it was game 4 that, we double teamed them at the end of the game. I thought caught him off guard. We blitzed their pick and roll. How long do you want to continue to blitz him? You watch the Phoenix series and watch their Clipper series last year when teams are blitzing him during the whole game. You're going to give something up. You're going to give up a Finney Smith 3 at 40%. But you shrink your rotations and try to make that easier. And you change game to game. But I think that's, to your point, that's the nature of the game, to be able to react like that. And I think in the playoffs, it becomes even more important and more visible because you're playing the same team, so to the extent that, great players will adjust as well. I mean, you can see guys doing this on the floor, changing spacing. You know, you clear out because I want a single side. I can get the lob. And sometimes things you do don't work, you know, not because they're tactically not sound. You don't execute them well. You know, there's a handoff play that you're supposed to switch. You don't switch it. You know, they score. Does that mean you try not to switch it again? You know, do you want to try it again? So if it's a high volume play, you better look at it again. First, you want to see if you can execute something. You know, there's a reason you start in a certain way. And then again, you know, teams force you to react. And I think the most important thing is your preparation up to that point. You know, that you have a menu of things that you can do. You know, we can, you know, we can channel black, we can blitz, you know, we can late channel black. Now we've got Rudy on Doncic in the high quadrant, and he shoots 50% against fives in isolation. You do want to live with that. So do you go double him off the feeder immediately? Do you try to invert on the backside, you know, and get a different matchup? You know, then they're playing pick and roll to get the matchup they want. So that's really what makes this fun on a lot of levels. And, but in contrast to the previous question, you know, the response portion, you know, is only valid if you have time, you know, and you have a little bit of time between games. We've got an off season right now, so I think it gives us time to really dig in deeper and
what
come
about
up.
reacting to the emotional ups and downs? It seemed like there were a lot.
Yeah.
Highs in December, low January.
No, that's you know, I'm glad you said that, because that's probably more impactful. That shows itself on the court with your execution as well. You know, when you see a team that is quick to a huddle at a free throw, you know, or is a team dejected, you know, how do you respond to a turnover? That was a big emphasis for us early in the series, that if we make a mistake, you know, getting to the next play, not, you know, wait till a dead ball to build your case with the referee, you know, all those different things that are emotional responses. And you can't have a team that plays without emotion. I think emotion can be, you know, incredibly valuable. It can provide you resolve and strength. And at the same time, you know, like most things, if you become too emotional, you can lose focus. But, you know, January was, I think one of the key things about emotion is what are you reacting to it? Is it something you can control, you know, or is it something like COVID, you know? And that's obviously, you know, the most current example that we all feel, you know. And then, you know, do people get discouraged in a situation where, you know, you need to do your best and you know, try to get through a period that's difficult. The same can be said, and you saw it this year at various times when, you know, how do you react emotionally to success? You know, and what can you do on that level to keep focus? I think that's the main thing is, you know, can emotion help you focus more? Can you keep focus, or does it take away your focus? It can do all.
It's Quin Snyder addressing the media right here on 97.5, 1280 The Zone and the Zone Sports Network.
You know, just as coaching Utah Jazz for next season, how does this team get, you know, the definition is going to be champions are the ones that are probably the most matchup proof. How do you guys get matchup proof? You know, how do you get better as a coach, you know, heading into your next season? I mean, what, you know, how do you move this thing forward individually and collectively as a group?
Well, first of all, I think it's something that you embrace, you know, and it's something that we try to embrace as a staff. I try to personally, on specific things like matchups, from a coaching standpoint. You can try to control them. Sometimes it's difficult to control them. You can put a player in hedge instead of a switching situation, which gives other things up. But I would say, you know, we got this year, and it's a little counterintuitive, we switched a lot of pick and roll with smalls, even though it changed matchups, because we didn't always feel that there was that big an advantage to a matchup. Now, we ended up putting size on Brunson after the first couple games. We ended up, you know, putting Boyan on Doncic. we didn't do that during the year with Bojan, but we knew that Bojan in a playoff situation was capable of doing that. He did a heck of a job, the year before guarding Kawhi. He's guarded post-up players more, though. And, he'll remind you that he guarded LeBron in the playoffs a few years ago when he was with Indiana. So I think, all those things you can do on a granular level, some of which I described from a coaching standpoint. And then on a more macro level with a team, that's, again, embedded, in the process that I'm talking about. And I think the more you can kind of have clarity on those things, the better able you are to develop a plan in order to do it. Oftentimes you can have goals, and then how can you reach them? And that's where competition helps you see that. And whether it's an individual matchup or a team, we mentioned the shooting. I'm not sure. We take a lot of shots. We actually had a practice where we tried to just and had shooting games, and had fun with it, just to try to have a little more levity. And if that was something that we were feeling too much pressure on our shots, we could address. But there's all kinds of things you can do. I think, trying to be as transparent with yourself and with your team as possible is something. We had 7 things on the board from the beginning of the year that we generated, both from last season and in Las Vegas, that we looked at every day. And I would do a checklist to see if, have we, don't forget about this, don't forget about this. How much time are we spending here? Going back and analyzing we time how much our practices are timed down to like 30 seconds. You start adding up a week, and how much time did you spend on a given area running? And then you look at your schedule and say, well, we had about 60 minutes to work on a bunch of stuff. So you have limitations from that standpoint too. But I think the prioritization allows you to use your time effectively, and focus your resources. In this case, time being the one for me that's, a very important one. So in my mind, the same process as you go through other things that you need to be able to do to improve.
And Conley said after the season, you're a team that's built on unity, and at times you've lost that. Do you agree with that, and to what extent? And then how do you address that issue of unity moving forward?
Well, I don't know if unity would be the word. I think every team wants to have unity, and that connectedness that you can see manifest itself in so many different ways. There's a number of values, for lack of a better word, for me, that I hold at a really high level and want to see demonstrated by our team on the court. I think that's the best indicator of how much you believe something is how you live it, how you play. Unity and, connectedness is always challenged. It's challenged by an opponent. It's challenged during the course of a game, with adversity amongst a group. And I don't think there's a formulaic way to approach that. There's indicators, and when Mike says for us, when our guys say that, you lost that, there's some specific things that they're probably referring to, whether it be ball movement. To me, running back on defense is probably the biggest one. If you spend a lot of time talking about running back on defense, you're probably not as focused as you need to be, because that's something that everybody can do. Now there's ways to do it. It's better to have Rudy back there, but that means he's not offensive rebounding. So as far as addressing, I think we've been, when one of the things I'm proud of our program is when you say Jazz basketball. I mean, I think you guys have heard that. You have a sense of what that means. I don't know if you can say that about, every team in the league. So when you say that, and it means something, that means you've built that and you have it. And whether it's a question of emphasis or through experience, you stray from something that is your identity and it does unify you, you have to continue to try to get back to it. And, that happens for players individually. It happens in a game. And as I said, I don't think there's a formula there. Those are things that you watch on tape, that you show guys individually, that you show collectively, so guys can feel it as a group, and approach it that way.
Along the lines of building that identity of Jazz basketball, when we've talked multiple times before about kind of the illusory nature of continuity, but when you've had kind of multiple seasons that end in, before you want them to, how do you kind of evaluate how much continuity is good versus how much change is necessary, both in terms of roster construction and in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, just speaking for what we do, there's probably, I would challenge you to find a team that in a span of a decade led the league in defense and then led the league in offense over, however many years separated. So I think from a coaching standpoint and a personnel standpoint on the floor, you weigh that continuity where you have something that you emphasize and you do well and you want to do even better, versus has your personnel changed in a way that requires you, did you sign Boyan and, trade Fave? that changes your team, a lot. And that's not continuity. That's change. So I think adapting to change, I think you're getting at some of the discussion that I've referenced is, happens throughout the course of the summer with a larger group, at the roster. Again, I defer more to Dennis and Danny, although, I'm the one as a coach that ultimately is, tasked with maximizing the roster. And so, I think, again, there's a sweet spot there. How different players, connect with one another, maximizing that. But it's a great question. We all know that over time that it's hard to sustain a certain level for a certain individual or combination of individuals. That said, if you're at how high is that level? That's a really high level. I think that continuity becomes a real asset. So it's a really good and difficult question to answer because it's so nuanced and there's so many variables that go into it. I think it also goes to kind of how you define success. There was a sense that our season this year, the regular season, and I think it's true. The contrast between the previous year, I think we maxed our team out during the regular season, on a lot of levels. And that said, we were left at the end of the year feeling a certain way. This year I thought that our record didn't necessarily reflect what we could do in the playoffs. I felt like we were this close to just having a spark and kicking it in and finding that unity, wherever it was, that kind of extra secret sauce and taking off. And obviously that didn't happen. So I think part of it is what you're looking at and balancing, we've been to 6 straight playoffs. I've heard this when people try to say, hey, hang in there, Quinn, how you doing? You've won the 3rd most amount of games in the league in the last 5 years. But no, I'm not hanging my hat on that. We want to do more. We want more, so, again, what things can you control and how much do they impact? And then how do you approach the roster that you do have? Do you try to do things differently as far as how you play? We kind of discovered that, 3 years ago when ironically Boyan was out. So there was like this urgency to shoot more threes. And, we're that much better. You look at our record when we X percentage of our shots from three. It's not even close. So when they're not going in and everybody wants us to do something else, the games we do something else, we don't do so good. So, but, can you supplement that? That doesn't mean that you can't do other things, So, when people take away your threes, how do you respond to that? So, again, I think it's a complex question, and the overarching, I think, thin red line that goes through my answer is that, you're not satisfied, and no one's satisfied. The fans aren't satisfied. Reach a point where you want more, and that's the nature of sport. That's competition. So try to do that.
What direction is the NBA heading in as far as some of these trends, and what do you need to add to keep up with the metonymy of Jazz basketball? What does that need to be able to improve and stuff like that?
I think when we talk about Jazz basketball, early on, it kind of evolved. Early on it was stingy defense because we were going to have to, grind out wins a certain way. But even during that time where we weren't as good offensively, we really moved the ball and were a multiple action team. So there was more, our passing numbers were higher. As at least in my tenure here, the concept of Jazz basketball, I think was ball movement, man movement. When you get really, really effective shooting, you don't necessarily want Bojan cutting all the time. That said, one pass might end up with an open shot. So you have to be able to take what the defense gives, adjust to a team, and that unselfishness to me, you can be unselfish by passing the ball ahead to a guy in the corner and having him shoot. It doesn't look the same as drive and kick. I would contend that sometimes, you have to play to your strengths, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't think it necessitates certain things that you can objectively quantify all the time. I think that those are clearly, good markers for you and indicators. As far as what the league is doing, the league is usually doing what the best team does when they win. So pace and space, a few years ago, and when did the Warriors win their first title? Everybody, I know for myself, let's play with pace. And I got here and we were playing slow and we were really bad. And I was like, I don't know, why are we playing with pace? We're not the Warriors. So you try to maximize what you have. And, Dallas plays slow. They try to play fast when Doncic was out of the game. They played much faster against us then. It's probably a good thing for them to have the ball in his hands, if that means playing at a slower pace. So I think you see, Phoenix plays big. We play with the center. If a team that has a center wins, we'll probably tilt and say, well, you can win with the center. For the longest time, how can you win small? Punish you small. It's harder to handle. It's easier to handle double teams on the post. Isolation. There was a point when no one liked isolation, too much isolation. And now we look at isolation and say, when you involve multiple guys in a play, it's easier to defend. Defenses can do things to you, So is that a trend? It goes back to me to, what does Steph Curry do to maximize, his impact? It's different than what Kevin Durant does, and I think each team is different too. But I think you can fall into a little bit of looking at another team and saying, we're going to do that, if that's not what you're good at. Now, that said, if you think you need to do that to win, you either try to get better at it, one way or the other. And I think that's where it's important to have a pulse in the league. Because I say that about Golden State, you can say the same thing, about Detroit. The either team, the old bad boys team, go that far back. The league, the rules changed, so that's an easy one, right? Once the rules changed, everybody started to adjust. But there's a sweet spot there where I think you're balancing what your team can do with new ideas, and I think that adaptation is really important. We did that kind of work together, right? We got smaller, we added shooting, we weren't as good defensively, tried to maximize this. Now do you tilt back the other way, say we need more of this, where is that line? And I think that again is something that requires a lot of focus and then having an opportunity to kind of map it out and see what it looks like. Daniel House did a great job for us coming in as a perimeter defender. And are there limited minutes, if Joe's not hurt and here, how does that impact your ability to get guys on the floor? So there's a lot of things that go into it.
What happened with Rudy Gay this season? Just overall.
I think first of all, the first part of the season, he was injured, and that his injury, the rehabilitation process, return to play took longer than I think he expected and that we did. So he didn't begin to play until, mid-November, Thanksgiving time. And then there's a process of, if you haven't played in a long period of time, you're getting reacclimated. And, we talked before the All-Star break, about really, because he was fighting a knee and his foot, like just say, let's get you healthy. Because I know there's going to be, opportunities where you're going to be able to help us. And I think, and then when he did come back, Juancho surfaced, and I think the things that Juancho did for us in that second group, that was basically the role that Rudy was playing in, earlier in the year. And Juancho was really effective, and, my discussion and dialogue with Rudy is going to be matchup oriented. I mean, you saw the games that he really played and contributed at the end of the year. It was the Clippers with matchups with Morris. It was Memphis, and then you go into the playoffs and you have a very different matchup. So, I think all of that becomes circumstantial.